Okay, imagine a story that feels like it's straight out of some primetime drama. But this one's actually playing out very publicly. We're talking about the really intricate, deeply personal family stuff behind a major television
Yeah,
network.
it's got everything, doesn't it? Power, faith, and, well, a whole lot of controversy that's definitely caught people's attention.
Absolutely. So today, our deep dive is going to unpack a truly complex situation. It centers around Joni Lamb, who's obviously a huge figure in Christian television, and the Daystar television network she co-founded with her late husband.
Before we move further in the podcast, we will appreciate if you subscribe to the channel. Also, share your thoughts in the comment section.
That's right. And our mission here is really to pull out the key insights from the source material we've got. We want to give you a pretty comprehensive understanding of the allegations flying around, the personal dynamics, and maybe some surprising details you might have missed.
And the specific source we're focusing on for this deep dive, it's an excerpt titled Joni's Reckoning, A Mother's Choice and Daystar's Crisis. Now, for those of you who follow this world, you'll probably recognize this title, or at least the tone. It presents a very, very critical perspective.
Hmm. Very critical. So just to be clear up front, our aim here is to impartially report on what this specific source says. We want to give you a clear window into its viewpoint, but, we're not endorsing its claims or opinions.
Exactly, just laying out what's in the text.
Yep.
So let's get into it. Where does the story really begin, according to this source?
Well, it takes us back to the 1980s. You have Marcus and Joni Lamb, described as a pastor and his wife, deciding to start a television network, Daystar.
And the source emphasizes their southern roots, right? Building this vision.
Yeah, it does. And it spent some time on Joni's background specifically. Born in Texas, Greenville, small town, rural setting, strong sense of community, Texas pride, that sort of thing.
Okay, and how does the source connect that upbringing to Daystar and her ambitions?
Well, the source presents it as pretty foundational. It suggests that Texas background, maybe that go big or go home kind of spirit, directly influenced her drive. It claims it fostered this ability to build and run Daystar, which the source says she views as her empire.
Your empire.
Yes, and one that, quote, must be protected at all costs. That's the framing. This protective instinct is painted as almost, ingrained from her background.
And it's that very drive, that protection of the empire that the source argues leads right into the heart of the current conflict. This is where things get really intense in the narrative.
Yeah, the central conflict, as laid out here, revolves around Joni's desire to remarry after Marcus's death. The source alleges this led her to, and this is a direct quote again, sacrificing her only son, Jonathan, and Daystar.
Wow, sacrificing her son. That's incredibly strong language.
It is. And the source doubles down, asserting that this kind of act is, quote, not recorded in the Bible or in church history until now. It claims this has sparked unprecedented global outcry.
So it's framing her personal decision as something almost biblically or historically unique in its negative implications, at least within that faith context.
Precisely. It immediately raises the stakes in the reader's mind, positioning her actions not just as a personal choice, but as some kind of major deviation.
And the source brings in other voices too, right? There's mention of a former assistant.
Yes, an unnamed former assistant. Apparently, this person initially believed Jonathan's side of the story over Joni's. They described Jonathan as a humble young man, soft-spoken, not the type who would, quote, be just making this stuff up to gain anything.
So adding a layer of perceived credibility to Jonathan's claims.
Right. And then the source makes this, really stark comparison. It references Ezekiel 23.37,
Okay.
which is a biblical verse describing, frankly, a horrific act of child sacrifice. The source explicitly frames Joni's decision regarding Jonathan in a similar vein, calling it a heart-wrenching decision made for her new marriage.
That's an incredibly loaded comparison to make, especially for a religious leader.
It absolutely is. It's not subtle. The source uses this powerful, almost shocking parallel to underscore just how extreme and, in its view, unnatural Joni's actions were. It's a very, very pointed interpretation presented in this text.
Okay. So moving from that specific conflict, let's talk about Joni's persona, as the source describes it. It mentions her leadership style. What picture does it paint?
It paints a picture of someone who expects total compliance. The source says all she wants to hear from anyone is yes, ma'am, and suggests that, quote, you really can't go against what she says if you're smart. So an image of very tight control.
And does a source connect this to how Daystar itself is run? beyond just personal interactions.
Yes, it claims this demand for compliance extends to covering things up. It alleges there were multiple allegations of abuse and misappropriation of funds that were deliberately hidden to protect Daystar's image. It presents this not as isolated incidents, but as almost systemic, driven by her determination to keep anything negative under wraps.
Wow, okay. And what about her personal life? The source seems to touch on that quite a bit, too.
It does. It talks about her artistic life as a singer, but also describes a, quote, thirst for opulence and self-gratification.
Opulence. How does the source link that personal taste to her role at Daystar?
It argues this thirst for opulence is, quote, well exhibited, especially in her unyielding stand, against exposing any seemingly negative aspect of Daystar's image. It goes into detail, mentioning her alleged need to own mansions, to live a lavish lifestyle, take expensive family vacations.
So, connecting a desire for luxury with a need to maintain a flawless public facade for the network.
Exactly. The source presents these not just as lifestyle choices, but as evidence of a perceived gap between her public ministry persona and a more, let's say, extravagant private reality. It even gets really specific about her daily routine.
Oh, yeah.
Like her preference for healthy eating, having a little bowl of grits for breakfast. It describes these executive conference room lunches with linen tablecloths and, quote, appropriate dinnerware. Very specific details. It even says she has a good chef and is, quote, literally a celebrity.
That level of detail does paint a vivid picture, doesn't it? And certainly, as the source presents it, a stark contrast maybe to the network's broader messaging or humble beginnings.
Right. That seems to be the implication the source is pushing.
Now, this isn't the first public storm the family has weathered. The source reminds us of Marcus Lamb's past infidelity.
Yes, his 7-year adultery, as the source terms it, which Joni herself had publicly addressed, calling it an emotional and inappropriate relationship.
And what does the source say about Joni's handling of that crisis, her focus?
Well, this is interesting. The source claims that during that period, Joni was, quote, not interested in keeping her home and her children, but rather interested in the empire Daystar.
So prioritizing the network even then.
That's the claim.
Yeah.
And it contrasts this with advice reportedly given by Joni's own mother, Sandra, during the infidelity, who apparently told Joni, you sick with that man, don't leave him. The source uses this to imply Joni's priorities were perhaps elsewhere.
And it also touches on her emotional composure during that time.
Yeah, it mentions her, quote, perfect ability to manage her emotions through it all, almost presenting it as maybe cold or overly controlled given the circumstances.
Okay, so that brings us back to the present situation described in the source, the new marriage.
Right. Which the source calls Joni's non-negotiable decision to marry Doug against all odds and godly counsel. This decision, it claims, really set the stage for the major blow-up with her son, Jonathan.
And there were explicit warnings, weren't there, from other ministry figures?
Yes. The source highlights a direct warning from Pastor Rodney Howard-Browne in February 2023. He apparently told Daystar staff very clearly that Joni would be, quote, living in sin if she married Doug, and that he himself, quote, won't come back as long as he's married to her.
That's a significant public rebuke from a peer.
Definitely. Now, Doug, her new husband, the source gives a little background on him, seminary degree, licensed psychologist, ministry experience, TV personality. So someone familiar with this world.
And the conflict with Jonathan escalated because Joni wanted Doug involved at Daystar.
That's what the source claims. Specifically, that Joni wanted Doug to essentially step into Marcus's old shoes to fill roles that Marcus once played, including as a co-host.
And Jonathan resisted this.
Apparently so. The source even includes a direct quote attributed to Joni, speaking to Jonathan. You have been cold and you have been rude. You have not been Jonathan, that I know you have not been your father's son, you have not been.
Not been your father's son. Wow, how does the source interpret that specific line? It feels very loaded.
It does. And the source offers two possible interpretations. One, that it meant Jonathan was refusing to compromise his biblical beliefs by resisting Doug's integration. Or two, that it was a deliberate cutting remark, a, quote, ploy, to essentially call him a bastard before she ultimately, quote, sacked him from Daystar.
So either a defense of his principles or a deeply personal attack. The source leaves both possibilities on the table.
Yes, it underscores the ambiguity and the potential cruelty in that kind of language within a family feud playing out in a corporate setting.
And attempts to reconcile failed. Mediation didn't work.
No, the source mentions failed attempts at restoration, resolution, and mediation. And it adds another layer. claiming Joni accused Jonathan's sister, Susie, of controlling him. So further fracturing within the family.
Okay, stepping back from the immediate family drama, what does the source say about the impact on Daystar itself recently?
It states that the network has faced significant challenges. There's ongoing pressure, it says, from the public and programmers demanding accountability and moral rightness.
What kind of pressure exactly does the source elaborate on that from viewers, advertisers, affiliates?
It implies a mix. The phrase public and programmers pressure suggests it's coming from both the audience base and potentially other entities involved in broadcasting or supporting Daystar's content. It paints it as a sustained demand for accountability, like an ongoing searchlight focused on the network's ethics and finances, pushing for transparency in light of these controversies.
And how has Joni responded publicly, according to this account?
Well, the source notes she's made public statements. She's described this whole situation as her second most difficult storm. She's expressed heartbreak, saying things like, "There's nothing that pulls at your heartstrings more as a mother than your own child."
So acknowledging the pain, framing it as a mother's struggle.
Yes, but the source immediately casts doubt on this. It suggests her public confession could just be another deceptive move
Deceptive. How so?
to regain the trust of those Daystar programmers and viewers and to try and, quote, quell the ongoing searchlight. Basically, damage control presented as vulnerability. The source's final word on this is pretty blunt. It concludes that Joni cannot be trusted.
Wow. A very definitive and critical judgment from this particular source.
Absolutely. No ambiguity in his final assessment of her character and motivations.
Okay, what a deep dive indeed. We've really unpacked just a massively complex and, frankly, emotionally charged situation here based on this source. You've got this interplay of family, faith, power, all playing out very publicly within this huge media empire.
It really does shine a light on the intense scrutiny that public figures, especially leaders in faith communities, face when their private lives crash into their public roles and the expectations that come with them.
Yeah, absolutely. And understanding these dynamics, it's not really just about the headlines, is it? It's about seeing how these deeply personal choices, as presented by the source, can potentially ripple out and impact huge organizations' public trust.
And also how different viewpoints, different sources, can frame the exact same sequence of events in dramatically different ways. The lens matters so much, and this source definitely provides a very particular, highly critical lens.
Right. So for you listening, maybe the takeaway is to think about that clash. When a leader's personal life and choices, especially as depicted in a critical account like this, seem to conflict with the public expectations or the principles they publicly stand for, what's the real cost?
Yeah, and maybe also, how do we, as observers trying to make sense of it all, navigate these deeply personal stories and these really charged accusations, especially when different sides frame things so differently? How do we find the truth or something close to it?
That's definitely a question worth pondering long after we finish talking about this today.